Some people don't become poor when they lose money. They become poor when money replaces everything else. Long ago, in a land ruled by crowns and silence, there lived a king named Midas. He had walls of stone, vaults of gold, and servants who never said no. But Midas was not satisfied. Each night he walked his halls alone, running his hands across metal and coin. Gold made him feel safe. Gold made him feel powerful. And slowly, it became the only thing that mattered. A feast no longer pleased him unless the plates were heavy. A gift no longer moved him unless it glittered. A room no longer comforted him unless it shone. He did not measure life by warmth or laughter or rest. He measured it by value. And value to him meant gold. That is how poverty sometimes begins, not in the empty hand, but in the narrowed heart. One evening, as the palace grew still and the torches burned low, a stranger appeared in the great hall, not dressed as a king, not speaking like a beggar. He stood in the firelight as if he belonged to no rank and feared no throne. Midas did not call for guards. Something in the stranger's calm held the room in place. The man listened as Midas spoke, of fear, of loss, of the hunger for certainty. Midas spoke as men often do when they think greed is only caution wearing a crown. Then at last he said, "Grant me this. Let everything I touch turn to gold." The stranger studied him quietly. "Are you certain?" he asked. Midas did not hesitate. At dawn, he woke smiling. The morning looked ordinary. The light touched the curtains. The stone floor held its chill. But the king no longer felt ordinary. He reached for the table beside his bed. Gold. He touched a cup. Gold. He touched a carved pillar in the hall. Gold. Servants gasped. Torches flashed against bright new surfaces. The palace shimmered as if the sun itself had been trapped indoors. And Midas laughed. For the first time in years, he felt larger than fear. What he had once counted, he could now create. What he had once chased, he could now summon. That is the intoxication of confusing power with control. It feels, for a moment, like freedom. By midday, the palace had changed. Wood had become metal. Cloth had become metal. Rose petals in a bowl had become cold golden shapes that held no scent. Still, Midas was pleased, until food was brought to him. He reached for bread. It hardened in his hand. He lifted wine. It froze into gold at his lips. The room changed then, not in color, in meaning. Hunger entered the palace, then fear, then something worse. Footsteps sounded in the hall. His daughter, bright and living, ran toward him without hesitation. Midas turned, still caught inside the habit of reaching. He touched her, and she stopped. No cry, no breath, no warmth, only gold. The hall fell silent. The king stood frozen before the thing he had wanted most, a world where everything he touched became value. And at last he saw what value without life becomes. A feast that cannot be eaten, a cup that cannot be drunk, a daughter that cannot answer when called. Gold does not breathe. Gold does not laugh. Gold does not love you back. The palace still shone, but now it looked like a tomb. Midas walked through his halls again that night, but no longer like a master, like a man trapped inside his own wish. There were no thieves to fear, no loss to count, no uncertainty left to solve. And yet, for the first time, he had become truly poor. Surrounded by wealth and emptied of what wealth was supposed to serve. That is the danger of pricing everything. When money becomes the measure of every good thing, you do not make life more valuable. You make everything else smaller. Warmth becomes inefficient. Beauty becomes decorative. Time becomes transactional. Love becomes fragile because it must justify itself against gain. Midas had not merely asked for gold. He had asked for a world where usefulness replaced meaning. And when that wish was granted, he learned too late that money is meant to serve life, not replace it. By morning, the palace was still bright. The gold was still real. The silence was still unbearable. Midas stood among his riches and understood the cost. He had not become powerful. He had become unable to touch life without destroying it. That is why some people, even surrounded by wealth, live in quiet poverty. Because the moment money becomes the goal, everything else turns cold. Money is a tool. When it becomes the goal, everything else turns cold.